Welcome to another episode of the Recruiting Masters, brought to you by the CFC Insider. I'm Clint Uttley. I'm here with Gord and Jim. We're going to take a look at a couple of different things. However, because we're getting into playoffs, more specifically in high school across the country, and we're starting to get into playoffs for the U Sports, and we're starting to get into playoffs for the CFL, we thought we'd ask the two masters what their predictions would be for both the Vanier Cup, we'll touch that first, and the Grey Cup, we'll touch that second, but we'll try and keep it short. I'll let you two decide who wants to talk first about who's going to win the Vanier Cup in 2018.
Go ahead.
Okay. Throwing it over to me, are you?
You're the boss.
Okay. Well, I like Western and Laval to meet in the final. I don't see a team from the Canada West challenging Western if they do the expected and roll through the OUA and win the Yates Cup. I don't think Calgary matches up really well against Western. I think the big question is, and I've been to Laval for a number of Vanier Cups, those things play out like home games. You're adding anywhere between 8 to 11 points in favor of the home team by playing it at Stade Peps, and we know why. U Sports is playing it at Stade Peps. They're guaranteed a really good crowd there and a great atmosphere, which they can't really be guaranteed anywhere else. So that being said, the question is Western 11 points better than the Rouge or? And at this stage, I'm not sure that I'm convinced of that. I think we still have to see the playoffs play out before I'm making a decision. It'll be the week of. Right now, I'm picking Laval.
That would probably be my pick too, although the other wild card you didn't mention in that whole equation is the Montreal Carabins. Mm-hmm. Now, Laval's already beaten them twice this season, but it's those four teams, Calgary, Western, Laval, Montreal, that I think are the only four that have a realistic shot of hoisting the Vanier Cup at the end of it all. And the one thing with Calgary, I will say, they've got Jesher and Antwi back. They're starting to be a little bit more two-dimensional on offense, and that offensive coaching staff, in particular Calgary plus Wayne Harris himself on the defensive side of the ball, do not underestimate their ability to game plan for a winner-take-all game and potentially take down Western. That will be a really interesting semifinal matchup, assuming that those are the two teams that get there. And again, there's no guarantee out west that a UBC, for example, or maybe even a Saskatchewan could take out Calgary. So things are pretty interesting. It definitely seems like there are those four teams that have separated themselves from the rest in terms of their quality. So when you're looking at conference playoffs, they always seem to turn out interesting, but in particular, keep an eye on that Laval-Montreal matchup and the likely matchup in the Dunsmore Cup. I don't see either of those two teams losing to a 2-6 team in the first round.
Yeah. The other reason that I'd go with Laval is they've got the easy route. They play the AUS team, so you want to take that 11-point favorite thing in Laval, add another 3 points onto it. That being said, though, you bring up Montreal, and that's a very good point. It's tough for any team at the top of their game versus another team at the top of their game to beat a team three times in a season.
3 times in a season.
Three times that's going to be tough. And Montreal has proven before that they can win in Laval for the Dunsmore Cup. They did it in 2015. And then when they went back to the Vanier Cup, they lost to the UBC Thunderbirds.
That's right. And then all of a sudden, that home field advantage is gone should Montreal win that game. In fact, I think we saw in that 2015 Vanier that it actually turned into a road field advantage because there were a lot of... Well, it was kind of split, actually. It was an interesting dynamic because there were just the pro-Quebecers that were cheering for whoever the Quebec champion was or out of respect for Montreal or whatever. And then there were the, screw these guys crowd that cheered for UBC. So it was kind of I almost hope that happens again because it was a really fun dynamic.
That would be fun.
For personal reasons, I'm going with the Acadia Axemen. Once an Axeman, always an Axeman.
Why don't you go with the Redmen?
AUS. They could come out of the AUS. St. Mary's is doing this right now. They are.
Well, St. Mary's, you keep doing that.
Why don't you go with McGill? They're your boys too, are they?
Yeah, they're in the playoffs. 2-6,
they
baby.
got a chance.
No comment. I hope they...
Good odds in Vegas.
You know what? They're going to go to Laval, and then they'll cash their check a month later.
Yeah,
so,
we know a team in red will win in that game.
Yeah. So,
Laval doesn't wear red anymore, though.
Black all the time now?
Well, pretty much, yeah. Black and the gold buckets.
Well, we know a team that wearing black will win that game.
I was going to say
it ain't going to. You guys know how that.
So my French is a little rusty, but I thought rouge meant red, but I don't know. Maybe apparently it's black now.
Yeah.
It's a new uniform each week.
You want to hit the CFL thing?
Oh, we're not hitting it. You know what? Because I want to see what you guys have to say because I know who I'm going to pick. CFL, quickly.
Winnipeg And I'll tell you why. I picked them at the start of the year. I'm on record, and I got to stick with my record on it. So
right.
I saw Winnipeg going across in the crossover at the start of the year. That's not happening now. The Lions have to go eastbound. I'm still going to stick with Winnipeg. Calgary's faltering badly. I think they got. I think the Bombers have a shot at this thing.
This hurts my soul to say this, but I think it might be the Rough Riders the favorite right now. I really do. Now, Winnipeg's got that ferocious defense led by Adam Bighill, who came back from the NFL and is probably having the best season of his career right now, which is a really high bar. But he's been fantastic. I still am not fully sold on Matt Nichols. The one thing for the Rough Riders, one thing for the Rough Riders though, what's the health of Zach Collaros like?
Right.
He got his bell rung in that game versus the Lions, which, by the way, if anybody associated with the CFL is watching this, to allow him to finish that drive when you have spotters in the booth is an absolute embarrassment and needs to be changed immediately.
Yeah.
I don't know what your spotters are doing, but that was absolutely pathetic. But for the Rough Riders, that's the real wild card is what's the health of Zach Collaros? Because if it is Brandon Bridge, they are not coming out of that.
Yeah,
Western
and
Conference.
that's why I tip in the direction of Winnipeg.
No
right
offense
now.
to the Mississauga native, I believe, or is Brampton?
I can't remember.
Anyway. But that's a totally different team with him at the helm. I was really high on the way the Lions were trending, and then they absolutely laid an egg in Regina yesterday. So it'll be interesting to see. Plus that crossover, we've never seen a team come out of the crossover and go into the Grey Cup. So the other team to not sleep on, and it seems like this is the case in the East every year, but in the last few years at least, is the Ottawa Redblacks, who don't necessarily move the needle much in terms of excitement, but they just get the job done. They're the clear best team in the East right now, so don't sleep on them either, because just a couple years ago they came up and surprised everybody and won the whole thing.
Well, it's nice that the field's wide open. As opposed to CIS football, the CFL is wide open. I think when it comes to the CIS game, maybe it's three teams. Let's move on to this stuff.
But I just got.
Oh, you got to throw yours
Jones,
in there.
Like Coach Jones, he's an absolute favorite for like 10 years, ever since he ran like flat top stuff in Montreal.
Yeah, I remember that defense.
Yeah, like ever since then, I've been a Chris Jones fan. So
just 6 up every play, pretty
much. Oh
much.
yeah, just go. Who cares?
Okay. You're picking it like a fan.
Yeah. That's all I do with the CFL now. Offensive. So high school players of the week. So these are the national high school players of the week according to CanadaFootballChat.com. So the offensive player of the week is a quarterback from École Secondaire Triolet in Quebec. His name is Jeremy Desinde. 22 of 31 for 391 yards passing. He had 6 touchdown passes. And then he also ran the ball 14 times for 111 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. So he had 7 touchdowns and close to 500 total yards. So that's probably one of the more impressive quarterback numbers I've seen all year, especially when you tie in the fact that that's an ultra-competitive juvenile division, and he did it against pretty good teams.
You look at his numbers too, 22 completions for 391. That's about 18 yards of completion or so. That's a really good number. That's an indication of his ability to get the ball downfield. It's probably also an indication of the type of talent he has as a receiver to help him out in that area too, because you're probably not, that's probably not all air yards traveled. And that's really the key when you're putting together an offensive passing attack is most defenses will let you complete the underneath stuff, take your 5 and 6 yard chunks, but how can you push the ball downfield effectively against defenses that are typically designed to take away just that? One of the things that does help with that, I might add, is that 111 yards on the ground, because if your quarterback could be, I think the single most dangerous thing for an offense to have is a quarterback that can move. Because it's just so hard for the defense to account for the quarterback as a rusher. It's so difficult. So if you have a guy that can extend plays on the ground via his legs, whether they're designed runs or not, that is just such a huge X factor for any offense.
Well, especially in Quebec, where at that stage they're playing 4-down football in a Canadian field.
Oh yeah, that's CJIP rules. That's juvenile rules. That's like defending as a defensive coach, like with the history of a defensive coach. Defending the broken play is something you can't draw up other than you run a spy concept, so you sacrifice a blitzer, you sacrifice a pass rusher, you sacrifice a cover guy in order to basically spy somebody who maybe your best athlete can run with, but can't really run with all the time because he's in a responsive mode. So defending the broken play, just to extend your point. And then we're going to move along. Defensive Player of the Week. We're just going to like make a trophy for him at some point, or maybe get a statue put up in downtown Winnipeg.
I assume, like John Cornish, we're just going to name this award after him, the Austin Ballon
I'll spray
Memorial
paint
Award.
one of these helmets gold here, and we'll just send it off.
Well, the thing is like he's a CFC 100. Okay, he's a free safety. He's obviously everything for his high school team. The game that these stats came out of were not pretty for his team, but it showed me that he probably was a one-man demonstration of how to play the game for 48 minutes or 60 minutes in adverse situations. So Austin played against Vincent Massey, #1 team in that province, right there with St. Paul's. He had 22 solos. He had 2 forced fumbles. He had 1 tackle for loss. He had 1 quarterback sack. And when he was not on the field making every defensive play or getting a drink of water when he ran back out for special teams, he also carried the ball 20 times for 104 yards against probably the second best or the best front 7 in like the province. So I don't know what to say. I just saw the score and was like, that sucks. Okay, but Austin obviously didn't he stayed in it throughout the whole thing, obviously judging by his stats.
So my generation, it's Bo Jackson Tecmo. For your generation, who would it be in Madden?
Well, Michael Vick was Vick in Madden 04, 05, whichever one it was that he was on the cover of. Like, you had to make rules with your friends. Like, you can pick any team, but you can't pick the Falcons.
Yeah.
Like a no Vic rule. You can pick the Falcons, but you have to start Matt Schaub. Oh, okay, well, there's a total difference. But he was like a cheat code in that game. It was unreal. You couldn't stop him no matter what you did.
Hey, I think you've got the nickname for Austin Ballon. He's the
code?
cheat code.
Cheat
Dude,
code?
you're the cheat code.
The
There you
cheat
go.
code.
You're the cheat code.
There we go.
He's
I
going
like
to
that.
Manitoba, so I mean, I'm curious to see how Dobie uses him. I want to see
Yeah.
if, I'm assuming Dobie's going to use him as probably a halfback or a DB, like an inside defensive back, but super.
But he's
super
got experience playing linebacker too. Up until
everywhere.
including grade 10, he played linebacker. He switched to DB to make the Team Manitoba for the Canada Cup a couple years ago, and then he kind of stuck there. But I wouldn't necessarily put it above Dobie to make him into a box hybrid Sam halfback type. But good job. I mean, Brian Dobie, as always, seems to lock down his choice of the litter from the Manitoba area. He's also locked down, we mentioned him a couple weeks ago, Isaiah Latander. So he's done well in his local area as per usual.
Well, even when UND goes in there and picks out a couple of players, he still has depth in those positions. I'm thinking of Brady Oliveira, where he still had depth in the running back position, where he could withstand having a recruit like that taken out of the Winnipeg area. So like he does well in terms of with his resources of zeroing in on what he needs and focusing his energy on those recruits that he needs.
I will say the one place to really watch Brian Dobie for moving forward, though, is what he's going to do at the quarterback position. The Des Catelier injuries kind of highlighted the state of that position, and Jamie Ibarra, who did pretty well against UBC, at least for a half, is already a fourth-year guy, having spent a couple years in junior. So he needs a future guy at that position. So it'll be interesting to see whether he goes local for that or tries to go. I know he's gone to the BCFC frequently for quarterback prospects. Maybe there's something out here again in that ilk. I don't know.
He'll probably go for the Brown kid out with the Raiders or the Rebels.
Is his name Brown, or are you being really incorrect?
No, his last name is Brown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So no. Jeff Brown was his dad. I played with his dad at Acadia.
Okay.
He's out there now. He actually played 1 or 2 years at Acadia, and then he bounced back, and he ended up out there. I think he was the player of the year in the conference, or he was an all-conference performer. Moving on is the lineman of the week. Because of the big victory that Cole Secondary Triolet had last week, we chose Alassane Diouf, who's a CFC 100 himself. Actually, he's one of the more impressive high school guards. He actually looks like a professional player already. He's every bit of 6'3", 310. Last week, his team, he paved the way for over 600 yards of total offense. So if you get a chance to watch somebody's film, Alassane Diouf from Cole Triolet, the Harfang, okay, he's probably one of the more impressive, physically gifted high school offensive linemen I've seen in a long while. I totally compare him to Godfrey Ellis, who played for the Calgary Stamps for years and years and years. He looks like a pro already. So.
Yeah, not often you get a true 300 pounds in the high school age group. And yeah, he moves pretty well. He's this kind of, despite being 6'3", he looks like this kind of compact build.
Yeah,
definitely
totally.
looks ticketed as an interior guy. But I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm starting 190-pound kids on my offensive line. So to have a 300-pounder would be just a dream scenario.
Wow.
Well, he's got the hips and he's got like the explosion, and you can see him run around, and you're just like, he's really impressive. So I'm interested to see how he kind of develops over Sec 4 and Sec 5 in Quebec, and then where he kind of ends up after that. Will it be at one of the profile CGIPs in the province, or will a school come down, one of the private schools come down and try and summon him out of the province? Which I'm sure all the CGIP coaches just stuck a needle in a voodoo doll for me mentioning that, which is fine.
New Mexico military.
Yeah, athlete of the week. Our athlete of the week is from BC. His name is Corey Johnson. He's from Langley High School, I believe. He had 19 carries for 173 yards, which is impressive. He also had 4 rushing touchdowns. And then he went over and played defense, and he had 9 tackles, 3 sacks, and 3 TFLs. This is a good-looking prospect. He doesn't have the biggest frame, but he just seems to be a complete baller. Like, he just seemed like it was maximum effort, and he was always working. It was really impressive what I saw, and even the stat line kind of added to what I saw.
Well, Langley Secondary he is at Langley Secondary, you're correct about that, and it's a really interesting program because it's in the AA ranks and has never quite excelled. It's always been a good AA program in the BC high school ranks, but if you look at the area around it, it has the potential in that here in BC at least, traditionally those big AAA powerhouse schools are able to be somewhat of a regional school. So they are one major football school alone in a larger area where there isn't another one. So you're at New Westminster, for example. They have that New Westminster Burnaby area more or less locked down because they're the lone big football school in that area. The same with Lord Tweeds, who are the #1 team in the province right now. It's the lone big football school in Surrey. So they've been enjoying the success of drawing from an entire huge area. Well, Langley Secondary stands in an area that is one of the fastest growing areas in the Lower Mainland right now. Langley itself is pushing 500,000 people, and Langley Secondary is the only high school that plays football. So they're in a really good situation to be able to be a powerhouse at the AA level, and don't sleep on the AA ranks in terms of producing individual talent, because while the overall quality of ball isn't quite as high as it is in the AAA ranks here in this province, there's a long history of stud athletes coming out of AA programs in this province.
And it's nice in a town like Langley that is very sports oriented that there's that option there for football players. Like, even if you take a look at Malik Irons, who was in Chilliwack, that had to go all the way into Mowat into Abbotsford to play. We've seen a lot of that in the past. I believe Rashawn Simonides was out in where was it, Mission, before he ended up out at Vancouver College.
Well, that's a common one at Vancouver College, so just because of the prestige of the school, and it's an independent school, it's not part of the public school system and stuff like that. But I mean, just within Langley itself, which is a huge geographic area with a big population, if Langley Secondary can start to can continue to work on their profile so that they can draw from the entire city, and as community football fades, which is still kind of relevant in the Langley area, there's both a Langley and a North Langley organization. If they can draw from those and start to become a pull that way, sky's the limit for that program.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, those community associations might actually give them strength if things align properly in terms of the midget program.
And I think you just talked about alignment. I think it also helps that they play out of the same home stadium as the BCFC's Langley Rams, and I think that level of alignment is also a good factor for them as well. And it's a good thing for the Rams to have what could potentially be a powerful pipeline in their own backyard.
And a great little facility too.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? I've never.
No, it's a great facility. We had the Women's World Championships out there, for example, and we did very well out there with them.
Yeah.
Anyways, Corey, good job. Moving on, we got a couple of top performers. They're not the players of the week, but they're players who had good weeks. Just a sidebar or a side note. A lot of the athletes, where it's easy for us to track them in BC, Alberta a little harder, Winnipeg super easy, Manitoba easy, but we're running into trouble getting stats in for kids from Ontario. So if the coaches could push their stats a little bit quicker, it'd allow us to actually recognize them or even advocate for them when things get going. So those of you from Ontario, if you think that we're heavy both east of you or west of you, the reason is that people simply aren't getting the stats into us in one of the biggest football regions in all of Canada.
Make some noise.
Make some noise. Coaches, get us the stats or the film at least, please.
Remember, you're not just a football coach, you are a promoter. That's what you do.
So now, transitioning from the players of the week to the top performers, or some top performances. Linebacker Matt Hogue, who's from Vancouver College, you just talked about, who had a really good game 2 weeks ago. We don't want to talk about that anymore. However, recently, he had 17 tackles. So just to put that into perspective, Austin had 22. So Austin is on another planet. Matt had 17, so that puts him close to Austin, but not quite Austin. But anytime an inside backer gets up over the 10 tackle mark or pushing over the 15, that is an outstanding individual effort within the team concept for any linebacker. And I've seen Hogue play. I've watched some of his film. He's actually a really solid prospect for VC, for a defense I think that's number 1 in the province right now, maybe up there with Tweedsmuir.
VC has a traditional pipeline to both UBC and to Western, so a couple power programs that definitely pay close attention to that school, and they're having another strong year this year after a really down year last year, like uncharacteristically down year, and people were kind of going, what's going on with Vancouver College? Well, they are back in a big way this season.
Huge.
Undefeated in conference play. I would say, BC's AAA ranks essentially boil down to 2 conferences. They're in the stronger of the 2 conferences in a conference where you have no easy games.
Nope.
Especially the one of the programs that was an easier game, unfortunately, had to fold this year, but they just have no weeks off in that conference, and VC's just been rolling.
Rolling over everybody.
BC also has an outside connection to Saskatchewan. They've fed players to the Saskatchewan Huskies program, and the Huskies have used the facility of O'Hagan Field to practice in the past, and they've come out to games for UBC.
Yeah.
So now that Saskatchewan's got their stride back again, there's another potential option.
Yep, for those
any
kids.
player
Yep.
coming out of Vancouver College.
Well, you talk about a nice little facility, that O'Hagan Field facility.
Oh, beautiful in the fall.
CFL teams come into town and regularly use that for their pre-game day practice. I know when the Argos came to town, I think because of the Kevin Ivan connection, but they went and practiced there. When the Ticats came to town, because of the Peter Diakowski connection, they practiced there. So it's that's a nice little facility.
Well, and with the fall we've had out on the coast, with the trees,
Beautiful
like
weather.
the setting is just
It's awesome.
fantastic.
Yeah,
it's
it is.
just a beautiful place to watch a football game.
only lacking lights.
Yeah. Well,
Not
maybe
as
they're
good as
working on it.
Mercer Stadium in New West.
residents want
but
them.
it's okay. Just joking, sort of.
The venerable Mercer Stadium.
All right, another outstanding performer, also a CFC 100, who plays on Harry Ainley, which is a CFC 50 team, one of the top 5s, is Eli Hetlinger, who I would say is probably the high school version of Drew Brees at this point. He went 11 for 16 for 376 yards and 5 touchdowns. I'm pretty sure he only played maybe a little over 2.5 quarters, maybe into the third.
Was that their Salisbury Comp game, or was that the
No,
week before?
this is the week after.
Okay.
He did not have that kind of game against Sal. Sal has some outstanding defensive prospects. We're going to talk about one of them actually in a sec. But Hetlinger went off 11 for 16 for 376 for 5 total touchdowns. And I'm pretty sure he didn't play the second half.
Could the Alberta Golden Bears ever use an arm like that? I mean, they've had inconsistency for one reason or another over the last, since Chris Morris has been there.
Yep.
And some of it's been
Baker.
outside of his reach, too,
Yeah.
in terms of injuries in the offseason and whatnot. He may finally be that local quarterback that he's said that he's always wanted.
He's awesome. I like it. He's undersized. I'll say that. But he has the potential to grow. But he actually is. He has a great supporting cast. But I also think he's extremely talented.
We were talking about yards per completion. 11 completions for 376 yards is over 30 yards of completion. That's something else.
I'm going to throw another stat line at you at the end of these guys.
11 completions, 5 TDs. Come on.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Video game.
Wow, how big could those numbers have been had the end zone not stopped them?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They would have hit the border. Athlete Cade Cote. He's a CFC 100. Cade, you're probably one of my favorite players in this recruiting class. All right, CFC 50 from Terry Fox. He had 17 for 150, aside from all my own players. CFC, he had 150 yards. He had 3 touchdowns. He also had 73 yards receiving, and he threw 12 tackles on top of that. You know Cade.
Yep.
Yeah, I really like Cade. Yeah. I'm going to cross 2 things off here. Usually we talk about the person, so offer that guy. I would strongly suggest anybody who hasn't, you may want to offer Cade Cote. Just with his numbers, whether it's his measurables or whether it's his times in different events, call them events, tests. So, he was recently down at the University of UW.
Yeah, he was.
So I'm
He
hoping
also
that
went to Montana recently too, if I'm not mistaken.
that wouldn't be surprising. Like 6'3", I think he's 195. I'm sure he'll correct me here if he gets a chance. But he runs the sub 4.6, and he actually ran a sub 4.55. So I mean,
Yeah.
like beat that. Tell me how you don't find that. So I mean, anyways, he had a good week. So
Well, I would say the fact that he's receiving notice from a team that is pulling in top 10, top
Yeah.
15 recruiting classes in the United States is probably a good indication of his talent level.
Yep.
Because Chris Peterson is no dummy.
Yep.
And that guy knows how to recruit.
Yep.
So
I mean, numbers are numbers. Like, they don't lie. So, I mean, moving along, we're going to the Salisbury. We just talked about Salisbury, or we mentioned them. Linebacker Jake Taylor had a good game. Finally, I think he played more than 2 quarters. May have played 3 quarters. He had 8 tackles. Probably the top outside linebacker in this recruiting class. He had 8 tackles, 5.5 TFLs, 2 fumble recoveries, 1 block kick, and he ran one of his fumble recoveries back for a touchdown.
well, talk about a guy that Chris Morris could use.
Well, he's
Alberta.
already got him.
He's
And that-
declared,
but that's
to
what I
Alberta,
mean.
but he's
That's-
still making visits.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
he was down in Montana a couple of weeks ago.
I think it's fair.
And I think when a couple of weeks ago we were talking about doing the right things in social media. Jake
Yeah.
Taylor's doing the right things in social media.
Including reaching out to us.
Yeah, and but also getting the pictures out there of his visits and being positive and being supercharged. I think it's 50-50 whether he lands in Alberta or not, or
he gets
lands
an
on the
offer.
other side on the
Well,
border.
when you say he's
gets an
still taking
offer.
visits too, important to point out, it's not like he's still taking U Sports visits. He's basically said, if I'm staying in Canada, I'm going
It's
here.
Alberta.
But I will look at Division I stuff and see what comes up for me there, and market myself and see what kind of opportunity I can get. And I think that's a really good approach to take. He's lucky also to have that, to be able to be in that position. And Chris Morris has allowed him the opportunity to say, look, like I'm a Golden Bear, but if something comes up south of the line, then I can take
go.
that.
And it may be a long game thing for Chris Morris too. Maybe he's anticipating that Taylor will go south of the line, might not like what he sees,
Bounce
and
back.
transfer back.
Yeah.
And he's a repat. Much like Grant McDonald in Calgary.
Yep.
Like everybody knew that with the McDonald connection to Calgary, he'd go to Calgary if things didn't work out in Maine.
Yeah.
They kept the line of communication open. Lo and behold, after 1 year, even after playing in Maine, he's in Calgary.
Well, it's something you talk about long game too on Chris Morris's side. That's probably something you want the reputation as if you're carving out a niche as a player's coach. Is I'm not gonna pull any kind of shady stuff or stomp on any other opportunities that come up just because we happen to come to an agreement. And so that's something he can market in the future as well to start getting names on paper, so to speak.
I'm here to offer the best opportunity possible,
Exactly.
even if I'm not the best opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, good
Exactly.
on him.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would hope that every U Sports coach would probably play that the same way with a kid of that talent level, where if you try and strong arm them, they'll just cross you off. So I mean, that's really the only way to really cover that off. Next is another defensive player, Aiden Bertuzzi from a CFC. He's a CFC 100 now. Cracked the list. Way to go, Aiden. CFC 52 Mount Doug. He had 5 tackles. He had 4 quarterback sacks, 4 TFLs.
Yeah.
Forced a fumble, and he batted 2 balls down. So I really like Aiden Bertuzzi. He does an awesome
6'3" with length.
Yeah,
the
length.
batted ball stat is not surprising.
No.
And you're talking about fast riser. He's been really putting on the performances as they've gone through that conference gauntlet. So that's been really impressive to see. As his schedule's gotten tougher, it seems like he's gotten better this
Done a
season.
bit better, yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be a fantastic field end or even a rush end, as I call it, in the U Sports ranks.
Yeah.
That kid who can play the edge. He's long enough to run around. He's athletic enough to run around. I mean, he has to work on playing the run, from what I've seen. But he's just he gets upfield, he makes things happen. So good for Aiden. The last one we're going to talk about, and this ties into Hetlinger and his video game stats. Athlete Jackson Hume, who I might add, Jim. 3 weeks ago we said somebody offered my tally, and he got offered. Last
There you
week we
go.
said somebody better offer Jackson Hume. And Calgary offered him. Not that they're listening to us. I get it, guys. But maybe we can go 3 for 3 this week. Anyways, Jackson Hume, who is one of the receivers for Hetlinger, had 3 receptions, check this out, for 200 yards. And he had 1 rush for 1 touchdown. When
That's a guy that shut it down early.
that guy should have. Yeah, why didn't you have any if you had 3 receptions for 200 yards and no receiving touchdowns, hopefully that's a typo.
But Clint, can he block?
Yeah. Well, when you're that fast, do you need to block? Yeah.
Sounds to me like 200 yards was his pitch count.
It was pitch count. He's like, yeah. If you're not going to throw touchdown passes to me, Eli, I'm sitting on the bench. Yeah. So, anyways. All right, CFC top 60 performers. Just so you know, there's the 100s who are in high school. For CFC50 teams. The 60s are all the players who play CJIP or go down to junior colleges, so on and so forth. This week we identified two CFC 60s. They are both 60s. The quarterback who we talk about forever around here, Jonathan Senegal, who's played on every team and probably achieved at every level. Last week went 13 for 15 for 227 and 5 touchdowns. I'm assuming that was in the first half. Those look like first half video game numbers. I don't understand if I was to throw another person on the off of that guy list. I would say Jonathan Senegal should be on that list. I know there was a coach, I think it was from Kent State, mentioned his name earlier this year. I'm hoping that he's kind of pushing into that territory.
Well, I was going to say, this looks like a guy who's more than ready for the university ranks, really has established himself in the CJEP level.
Yep.
And certainly I would expect to see him in the RSEQ next season if we don't see him go south of the line.
Yep.
But we were talking about, Sherby, for example, really desperately needing to pull a big quarterback prospect. That's a guy they should be absolutely all over, because not only does he have a high ceiling, but he also appears more polished for that level as a guy that could step in and give you at least competent quarterbacking play at the university level right away, which is something that they're sorely lacking this season.
He's just going to go to Laval. Think of the timing around. How many years does Hugo have left?
He's done. He's done.
This is his fifth.
This is his fifth. Yeah, he went through his draft last year. So hopefully somebody gives Hugo Richard a shot.
Yeah.
At the pro level, at least as a free agent. But in terms of this, it might be part of the cycle for Sherbrooke, actually, because every 5 years or so, they snag a big quarterback. It was Jeremy Doyon-Rock before, and then it was J.P. Chouare before that. So, maybe the time's right.
Defensive player, Ian LaRue, who plays FX Garneau, plays with a bunch of, there's Jeremy, he plays with a couple of high-profile people on that Garneau defense. But this young man has gone up, got better every week this year. So he had 11 solos, 5 assists, and 1 TFL. So he's actually doing an awesome job. So Ian LaRue from Garneau. We've already talked about Kate Cote. I'm going to kind of move this along quickly so we can kind of fit it in. There is a young man in the class of 2022. So those of you who don't know, that's like grade 8, grade 9. He is 6'5", 190 pounds. He's an athlete. His name is Jacob Kaminsky. Write it down. He actually is a man-child. His film was unbelievable. He plays defensive end. He plays tight end. He's from Cambridge, Ontario. He plays at St. Benedict. He would be my fast riser, or as I've started to call it, young buck of the week. So Jacob Kaminsky. He's awesome. Jacob, keep working hard. Don't let this go to your head. All right. Our recruiting masters, or our tip of the week. How do I know, and we'll keep it short, how do I know if I'm a Division I recruit? I think I've talked about this earlier in this football season. I'm touching on it again because I've heard some crazy stuff from kids, and I had a parent who might be delusional send me an email. All right? Are you a Division I recruit? Okay, odds are you're not. All right? Less than 1% of the football players in North America will sign or will get a full scholarship. You guys can jump in and cut me off whenever you want.
Well, and that's the big thing here. The big asterisk is full scholarship. Hey, if you're rolling in money and you're willing to pay your way down there, I'm sure a lot of these guys that end up in U Sports usually could get a preferred walk-on spot or something like that at one of the bigger universities in the States. But that's a whole lot of money. I mean, you're talking $40,000 annually as an international tuition in the United States. The odd person who might have their U.S. citizenship, that may be a little bit cheaper, but the reality is, in order for a Canadian to go down there, you're going to be demanding a full scholarship, which means that you don't not only have to be able to play at that level, you have to have some potential to excel at that level.
Exactly.
That's particularly rare. To answer the question in short, how do I know if I'm a Div 1 recruit? Div 1 schools will let you know if you're a Div 1 recruit. Put your stuff out there. If you're a Div 1 recruit, they'll find you and let you know pretty quickly if you're a Div 1 recruit.
Yep.
Well, one point that you have on your notes here that I think is really important to hit before we take off is, Don't listen to the uneducated or people who have the potential to make money off you in your development process.
Yep.
That's really, really key.
It's huge. It's totally huge. And I mean, listen to people with experience. And just to reinforce, if he's your personal trainer, he or she, or they're basically your coach in some other aspect of football development, okay? If they're feeding you that, you need to take a long, hard look at that. And then I'll end it on this point. Parents, don't pump your kids on Division I or bust, and don't be a parent agent. It drives people crazy, and it'll actually hurt the recruitment. Players, just be realistic with it. You're going to know or you're not going to know. You have to have the perfect numbers with the perfect test scores, and you basically have to hit the lottery, which is not impossible, but I'm saying it's hard. So anyways, that's your recruiting tip of the week. Thanks for joining us. I'll turn it over to Jim, and he can get us out of here.
Oh, yeah. Crowd Countdown Wednesdays on CBCSports.ca. Thursday nights, 11:30 on CHCH TV. And by the way, on that last point that Clint was making, also think about your education, because that's what you're getting out of this guaranteed.
Well, and if you want to go to the NFL, it's been shown now that if you excel enough and you have the measurables, put up the numbers in U Sports, the NFL will find you there too.
Yep.
So don't look at Division I as your necessary leapfrog to the pros, because that's just simply not the case anymore.
We'll extend this in another episode. I'm going to talk about this next week. We'll extend
Okay,
on this
sounds
point.
good.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, see ya.
Good luck with your prep.